New Yorkers will host a ticker tape parade for the FIFA Women's World Cup winners this Wednesday. The U.S. women's soccer team successfully defended their world title, defeating the Netherlands in Sunday's final.
But it's also reopening the debate around gender equality in sport. Our U.S. correspondent Sherwin Bryce-Pease says all 28 players of the U.S. women's soccer team are taking their fight for equal pay to court.
It was this team's back-to-back World Cup triumph and their fourth overall. And as they took a victory lap on the field, chants of equal pay from their adoring fans, especially when FIFA President Gianni Infantino took to the pitch. Although the calculations are complicated based on bonus incentives and so forth, according to reports, players in the women's national team would earn about $250,000 for winning the World Cup, compared to about $1.1 million for each player in the men's team. FIFA's prize money for the 2019 Women's World Cup was $30 million versus $400 million for the men's edition in 2018. In June, the U.S. Soccer Federation and the women's national team reportedly tentatively agreed to pursue mediation at the conclusion of the World Cup. A question put to the team's outspoken co-captain.
It certainly should be more, and I think that, I don't even know how to answer that question, but I think there needs to be a big investment made in the women's game. So maybe for once, God forbid we be overpaid. Maybe that could just happen one time, and then we'll see how it goes from there.
She was also asked if she heard the crowd chanting about equal pay.
Yeah, definitely heard that as we were kind of lining up on this. I mean, I think it's just everybody's ready for it. Everybody wants it. Everybody's ready for the conversation. We move to the next piece, and to have something like that, and obviously in the biggest match that went so far beyond anything sport, was pretty incredible.
A public feud between Rapinoe and President Donald Trump emerged when the former said she would refuse to go to the White House if invited, prompting President Trump to tweet that Rapinoe should win before she talks. He was asked about equal pay this weekend.
See that? Now you also have to look at numbers, because when you look at World Cup soccer, that's one thing, and you also have to look at soccer, professional soccer. You have to see who's taking in what. So I don't know what those numbers are.
Candidates running for the 2020 Democratic nomination also weighed in, with Senator Elizabeth Warren tweeting that the women's team deserved equal pay, while former Vice President Joe Biden, Senator Kamala Harris, and others have all called for the gender pay gap in sport to be closed.
I would do several things, starting with something we should have done a long time ago, which is to pass the Equal Rights Amendment, finally in this country. And also pursue legislation so that women are paid equal pay for equal work in this country.
UN Women says that worldwide women make only 77 cents for every dollar earned by men, pointing to a lifetime of income inequality between men and women, disproportionately forcing women to retire into poverty. The UN entity signed a memorandum of understanding with FIFA to combine forces to realize gender equality for women both on and off the pitch. Sherwin Bryce-Pease, SABC News, New York.
And for more on this story, our New York correspondent Sherwin Bryce-Pease speaks live with Phumzile Mlambo-Ngcuka, the Executive Director of UN Women. A very good evening to you, Sherwin. Thank you so much for joining us. They may have won the World Cup, but the U.S. women's soccer team's biggest battle is yet to be won. It's over to you, Sherwin.
Absolutely, Simpiwe, and you'll remember the spat between the co-captain of the U.S., the champion U.S. Soccer women's team, Megan Rapinoe, and none other than President Donald Trump. But of course, the focus now is from not just on the pitch, but to other issues that are around the success of this team and what it can mean, the momentum they now have for the women's movement around the world. And no better person to talk about this issue and all the issues around this, and in addition to Goal 5 of the SDGs, Pease, the Executive Director of UN Women, Dr. Phumzile Mlambo-Ngcuka, who is no stranger to South African audiences. Good to see you, ma'am, and thank you for your time.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
So you tweeted a short time ago your congratulations to these repeat champions of the United States women's soccer team, calling them true models for equal pay. What makes them true models? The fact that they won, or the fact that they won while being so outspoken about this issue?
Well, both, actually. But congratulations. First, they played well. You could see that they invested time to train and to prepare themselves for a job, just like any other soccer player, man or woman. And because of what goes into becoming a champion, whether a man or a woman, we really need to level the playing field for them to ensure that they also benefit in the same way. But also it's important that they are now using this platform to fight a bigger battle, not just for themselves, they are also fighting for other women. And they have been consistent about this. You remember that even when they won the last time, this was one of the issues they put in the table. So we would like to support them.
Is it a simple task, though? You know, you say level the playing field, and on paper that sounds so simple. And yet the way societies are layered, the advertising revenue in sports, all the different factors that come into play, is that something you're factoring into calling for this?
Changing all of that is leveling the playing field, because men were not born as the dominant players of the game. There has been investment that has prepared the stage and level the playing field for them. Women, yes, are coming late into the sports when men have advanced, but it does not make them less interesting players, less capable players. What we are asking is that which has been done to give the men the advantage that they have now needs to be done for women, but faster, because we don't have these many years that men have had to get to where they are with the game. We want the women to also fast track arriving at a place where there's full appreciation of their efforts.
And I'm glad you used the word faster and fast track, because I think we are beginning to sense an impatience, certainly on the side of women. You'll be aware
across the board
that this women's team instituted litigation against the US Soccer Federation because they want to be paid what the men in US soccer are earning. Does that sort of litigation, does that sort of forward movement in terms of going to the courts or going to mediation, does that have you and women's support? Is that what you want to see from more
form of
federations?
Advocacy helps. We want to try all the options that are available for many of these issues. We know that when there's a court decision, precedent is set, that can be used also in other countries. So we would like them to succeed, because if they succeed in the US, we can actually use that elsewhere in the world, and not just in sports, not just in soccer, but everywhere where we're fighting the battle of equal pay.
I hope, as in my role as playing devil's advocate, my Twitter timeline is not going to explode today, but let me try. You know, the counter-argument, Executive Director, is to equal pay is that women's sports don't attract as much spectators and therefore not as much ad revenue that accounts for what they pay. Is that a fair argument to make, or what needs to happen despite it or in spite of it?
Because the playing field is not leveled, we are asking that, for instance, where FIFA is the one that is deciding what is paid as prize money, FIFA can actually decide, you know, what the women are going to get, and make sure that they put them at the same level, because them especially know very well what it takes these women to get to where they are.
FIFA has decided. They've decided $400 million in prize money for the men's Soccer World Cup 2018. Half a year later, 2019, $30 million for the women. That's a huge disparity. That's a big
that is what
gap to close.
Someone has to set the standard and the price. Someone has to lead.
Set the example.
Yes, set the example. And what we are asking FIFA as a partner, whose success we also want, is actually to unstereotype, to take the lead, to create pressure for others to close all of the gaps that are holding the benefits for the women back. It certainly is extraordinary that one soccer player who is a man is able to earn annually something like $84 million US, and more than 1,600 women players altogether earn $45 million US.
Altogether, half of
come
what
on,
the...
Sherwin. You know, really.
You're preaching a little bit to the choir, Executive Director. And let me read you some of your data, right? UN Women says the current way ad spend is used, or money that is generated from watching sport, it reflects a cultural, social predisposition to male sport. The way sport is predominantly marketed to a male demographic, and hence you've partnered with the advertising industry, for which you received an award, the Lionheart Award at Cannes, the Cannes Festival in France, I think it was last month,
yes,
called the Unstereotype Alliance. Talk about the Unstereotype Alliance. You've just won an award for this partnership, and what you're trying to do in terms of how you communicate to the public.
We recognize that there are such set stereotype about women and men, for that matter, that progress is actually being held back because the stereotypes just reinforce unconscious bias. We are not experts on advertising and changing people's behavior as UN Women and as the UN. So we decided, you know what, let's go to the pros, the people who really every day think about how to nudge behavior. And we've asked them to help us through their adverts to change the way women and men are projected in the media in order for us to use advertising as a vehicle to create the future and the world we want for both men and women.
This gives me a good segue to introduce you to some of the advertising that UN Women has employed to get their message out into the world around equal pay for equal work. This was done with a hashtag Stop the Robbery. Hashtag Stop the Robbery. Let's play that ad and we'll talk about it when we come back.
Shoe-shine, get your shoe shines.
Get your shoe shined. Can we give you a shoe shine? Yeah, okay. You can choose. You can see Ben for $1 or you can see me for 77 cents. So you can pay Ben $1, or for the exact same shoe shine, you can pay me 77 cents.
Same shoe shining school?
We have the same degree in shoe shining. Valedictorians of our shoe shine class.
Who's better?
We're the same.
We're the exact same.
We have the same skills. Globally, women get paid 77 cents for every dollar that a man makes.
No, I don't know that.
You know that?
We don't know that.
I make 23 cents less.
Oh, I didn't think about it.
Yeah.
All right, I'll get the 77 cents.
Which would you rather?
77 cents.
What if I told you that the cheaper option was robbery?
But you guys aren't robbers, right? No.
Because you don't look like a robber.
No, I don't. I'm not. I don't want to be.
I think it is robbery, and you don't look like a robber.
No, I'm not. I'm not a robber.
You say about 70 years.
70 years.
What? Really?
70 years? 70 years.
Really?
Wow, I'd be like 90 something. Okay.
Yeah.
77 cents. You know what? I would rather give you the dollar.
You'd rather give me a whole dollar?
Yes.
Here is your well-earned dollar.
The whole thing?
Wow.
Woo! Thank you. Thank you so much.
Look at that.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you,
you.
Lester.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
This is great.
Thank you.
Thank
you so much.
There you go.
Thank you, sir.
All right, rock on. Thanks.
Let's keep the conversation going. Let's talk about it.
Awareness is the first step, and then hopefully they'll raise their voices, man or woman, to change.
People want to be heard. People want to have a voice. Let's get our voice out.
Stop the robbery was the hashtag of that ad that was released actually 2 years ago. It's 2 years later, and the robbery continues. How did that ad help, and what really is the message going forward?
Well, we've seen a greater uptake by employers, by companies, by member states passing legislation or trying to reinforce the implementation of existing legislation. And we're actually seeing more and more women having the courage to take their employers to court and demanding equal pay. But we still have a long way to go.
Yeah, you were saying when you signed the memorandum with Gianni Infantino from
Yes.
FIFA that not a single country in the world has equal pay for equal work. This is across sectors. This is not unique to the United States. This is happening around the world.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And if you also think that the equal pay decision of the ILO was adopted almost 100 years ago, and we're still fighting for implementation now. And part of what we pick up in the research about this issue and the intensity of resistance to equal pay is the assumption that women don't need a lot of money because they have partners, that they have someone who is a breadwinner, who will support them. When women have children and they take maternity leave, there is a risk that they will end up forfeiting some of their benefits. When a man has a child, he is likely to get more money because it is recognized that he has additional responsibility. So we call that a motherhood penalty and fatherhood reward. You reward the man for having a baby, you penalize the woman for having a baby, and that is a discrepancy that cannot continue.
So let me ask you, if you speak to governments or if you speak to companies, because you have strategic partnerships at different levels, what's the response when you say, why are you paying a woman 77 cents on the dollar to compared to what a man is? What's the response they give you? Because we talk about this entrenched nature of this problem. Like, how do we shift the foundations of it?
So most governments and public sector employers are doing much better. We have significant discrepancy actually in the private sector. In some cases, they will push back because they say they actually don't have the resources to pay the women. And we have to say, but this is not the women's problem. You need to budget for this. You need to give time frames within which you can turn this around. We also have not always received very good support, by the way, from the labor movement for this problem. This is one of the partners that we desperately need to be on board on the issue, so that the fight is not just for higher wages. It must be high and equal wages, because in that way, when you have the labor unions also on the side of the women on this fight, we would have been able to acquire a very strong ally. More and more unions that are part of our coalition are taking a stand on this, but we need more of their strength. You know how well unions can fight. This is the fight we can win if we have got the full might of the labor movement.
So that was an interesting dissection. Governments are doing okay, not so much in terms of the private sector and on labor unions, so then there's room for improvement. You know, in your discussion at FIFA at the beginning of this World Cup, you talked about how implementation, sometimes the policies are there, but the implementation of those policies are what's going to undermine us successfully reaching the SDGs, and particularly Goal 5, which is your baby. Why is implementation, why are we struggling with this? Why are laws not being implemented? Is this a thing that civil society needs to come on board? As you mentioned, there's a role for the labor unions. Where's the problem?
I think the accountability is weak on the part...
Mechanisms.
Yeah, just the people that are responsible for implementing law are not accountable enough. And we also, I think, as citizens, don't hold them accountable. We don't do enough to demand that there's delivery for the promises that have made, for the policies that exist. So there's a greater advocacy that is actually required. But also, law enforcement, to the extent that failure to implement good laws in a country has to be a concern. If it's in health, the health sector itself has to self-monitor and push for fairness in the sector. We don't do that enough. There's just a culture of accepting the kinds of barriers that have been with us for years and years. Is like that's the way of life. The exciting thing, though, about the younger generation is their impatience, because that, I think, is, as we have seen with Me Too, is introducing a sense of agency that we have not had, at least not to the same extent. But I have to say also, the people that have been fighting, like in the last 20, 30 years, to bring us to this point where we have a new generation that is so impatient, did the world a hell of a good service, making sure that we constantly are raising the issues, helping to pass the laws, on itself a big task. We now need another strategy in order to make sure that we move from where we are now and we take bigger and bolder steps to get to the finishing point.
And your message throughout this month has really been the role that sport can play in trying to get things done, in trying to implement. I mean, FIFA, if anyone tunes into a FIFA World Cup final, it's reaching billions and billions of people. So the power of this tool is very, very important. Speak not
one
just
of
to
the biggest,
FIFA.
The sports that has one of the biggest viewership in the world. Therefore, it speaks to so many people, the bigger microphone that any one of us can have. Because sports...
And with that comes a social responsibility.
That's a title of being the biggest of that comes the responsibility to use that power to bring about change. The people that are leaders in sport would like to be referred to as people who are serving society in everything that is good for society. The sporting fraternity supports the Sustainable Development Goals. Break it down. What does it mean to support Sustainable Development Goals? One of the ways in which you could help us using the platform that is at your disposal is actually changing the stereotypes about women and men and the way women are treated. Get the sporting entities to take the big leap and to do something that is extraordinary by recognizing the kind of a service that women also bring by being the champs that they have become.
So will you be in Japan later this year because it's the Rugby World Cup? Are you talking to the...
Well, I have... the other people from UN Women will be there. It doesn't have to be me, but definitely we're going to be making some noise.
Now, the point I'm making is, are you seeing an interest from other federations, from other world bodies to say, well, look what FIFA's doing here. Yeah, this is an example we need to follow. And with that some momentum behind you.
There isn't a sport that is not trying to reform. I just need faster. I need more voices. Recently, we had a tennis player who also said, or rather an actor, said, I will not cast for any movie without first seeing that me and my female co-actors will be paid the same wage. So those are the kind of leaders in the different sectors that we actually want to see. We want them to use their relative privileged position to actually change the game.
You've often spoken to me about the rate of change, and sometimes you make strides in one area, but you fall back in others, and that's kind of the game of the SDGs or the women's movement. Let me give you some good news. The United States 2-0 victory over the Netherlands is the highest rated soccer telecast in the United States, which isn't a big big soccer loving like other nations. But the people that tuned in to watch the women's final was more than people that tuned in to watch the final of the men's game in France in Russia last year. So yes, they had a US team in the final. Though. That might have made the difference. But more people watched the women's final than the men's final last year. I'm sure that gives you some joy.
That is the kind of data that we want to use to motivate those who are still pushing back, who claim that people are not interested in women's sports. If you give women an opportunity, and I also have to say this time, FIFA, more than ever before, tried to promote the women. They still have a long way to go,
Sure.
but I think the fact that they put in some effort, that is actually paying off.
So next year is another big year for UN Women. Beijing plus 25. I mean, this was Hillary Clinton in that iconic pink suit with the bangs and the bob, talking about how women's rights were human rights, or human rights were women's rights. Where are we at 25 years after Beijing, and what is it that you want to see from UN member states? You know, I know you held a pledging conference for people, for member states to recommit to new things that they want to bring to the table. Where are we at ahead of that celebration in France next year?
Well, the plans that we have is that at the CSW of 2020, the Commission on the Status of Women, we will produce a global report on the status of women 25 years after the Beijing platform was adopted. We have received reports from different member states. All SADC countries have now submitted their reports, including South Africa. We are compiling those reports into regional reports and then into a global report. In 2020, May, we will kickstart the call for accelerated action with accountability for taking this journey of gender equality to its finish. That journey will start in Mexico in May.
Okay.
And we will intensify a discussion, especially with young people who must really help us with their impatience. And it will start in May and it will end up in July in France, where we will then adopt a Mexico-France document that will be almost like an addendum to the Beijing platform, but it will all be about accelerated, measured, time-bound changes that need to happen.
The sense, though, when you look at the data or your annual reports, is that we are not on track to meet the 2030 deadline. Not just
we
goal
are not
5,
on track,
but all the goals.
We are also not helpless in the situation. We can still fast-track the implementation in a number of critical areas, because in some cases we have the intervention, but they're small, so we can scale up. In some cases we have the intervention, but the pace of change is slow. So with these 10 years that are remaining for the implementation of the SDGs, yes, we will not get the 100% that we would have wanted, but we can go, way up into more than 50% in the implementation, and making sure that the quality of the change that we'll see in women's life will be substantive.
We've got just under...
There's something that you can do. I don't want people to feel that this battle has been lost. This battle has not been lost. This battle will be lost if we do not heed the call. And next year when we provide evidence, because we would have surveyed, I think I am confident that at least we'll get 170 countries submitting the reports. So there will be a lot of data, evidence with suggestions for interventions and what to do. If we don't get the uptake with the same level of intensity and seriousness, I will be quite frustrated.
Yeah, we need to treat it like climate change, right?
Exactly.
That's the urgency. We have under a minute left. What was it like being in France ahead of the World Cup? I know you attended the opening game. What was this moment like for you, and given the cause and the organization that you're in charge of?
Of course, what was special in France was that Banyana was there.
Right.
Even though they did not
focus on the positives. Focus on the positives.
They fought a good fight. I was so proud of those young women. I really wish that there were more South Africans who came to support and to cheer them, the way I've seen South Africans travel around supporting Bafana. That for me was really, I wasn't happy with that. I was happy to see Danny Jordan, to see the minister there, but I think they needed bigger crowds to be there to support them and to cheer the girls. As I have to say, the handful of South Africans that were there
tried their best. They dominated the stadium, the noise and everything.
Right.
They were in such good spirits, and thank God the girls were really good.
Yes,
they were
a slight
really
enthusiasm deficit, but I think this World Cup will go a long way to changing.
Absolutely.
Executive Director, thank you so much. Good to see you, and thank you for your time.
Thank you.
The Executive Director of UN Women, Phumzile Mlambo-Ngcuka, and before that you annotated with Doctor. Let's take a short break, and when we return, the news at 11.